Computer. I want to pin both of our videos. Boom. Okay. Welcome, folks, to the Hughes Moves Spotlights. Today's episode, I'm joined by the fabulous Dr. Kate Henry. She is a colleague of mine. We both graduated. We graduated the same year, didn't we? I think so. Yeah.
2019.
Yep. Yeah, we graduated the same year at Bastyr University. We've taken a lot of very similar courses together, especially MindBody Medicine, which we're definitely going to be getting into that today. She has a wonderful, wonderful social media outreach, providing a lot of great content for a lot of people who need it, specifically with again MindBody Medicine, but also has an interest in um, uh, Parkinson's, Neurodegenerative Disorders. Great. So, welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, I want to start off by asking you, how did you get to where you are now? What was that process like? Going into medicine. Usually, it's not just kind of like I think I'm going to go into medicine now. There's usually some things that precipitate that, right? So let's talk about your journey.
Perfect. Yeah, I think I was like, I was going to go to the child welfare system actually.
Mm,
So I was a political science undergrad in undergraduate school, and was really sick and couldn't get better.
mm,
And all the best doctors, like I had had stomach aches since I was a kid, depression, insomnia, anxiety, and nobody would really know it to look at me, but I was really struggling.
mm,
And I just felt like I could do so much more for the world if my health issues weren't holding me back. And it was such a struggle for me for so many years. I think I was so frustrated with myself that I couldn't just like get better.
mm-hmm,
And I saw a functional medicine doctor when I was 21. They diagnosed me with celiac disease, and within
mm,
3 days, I was better. Like I was sleeping, my gut issues were gone, my hormones got completely regulated, my mood went up, and it was like it was a miracle. That's how it felt. And really, it was just basic science.
mm-hmm,
But it was science that I didn't know, and it was science that a lot of us aren't taught. I really
mm,
believe so many of us need to be taught about nutrition and biochemistry in school. It's our birthright as humans to know how our bodies work,
mm-hmm,
but we're not taught about that. And so my thought was, like after my health issues dropped away, I felt like I started achieving everything I wanted. And I thought, I want to do this for people, right? Like, I want to remove the stumbling blocks that are holding our high achievers back from doing their work that they're meant to do in the world. And before I was diagnosed with celiac, I was actually diagnosed with an eating disorder. And so I had spent time, 2 rounds of inpatient actually, for anorexia because I was so scared to eat. Everything hurt my stomach.
mm,
And I remember I got introduced to so many women through those programs, and they were all like CEOs, pastors' wives, moms, like
mm,
soccer players. It wasn't this image that we have in the media of like this sort of like bitchy teenager who just like doesn't want to eat because she's like what wants to be skinny. Like that wasn't it at all.
yeah.
Um, that never fit for me. I was a tomboy growing up. Like it never made sense why I was struggling with food so much, and so I just thought, my God, like there are so many women I know who I feel like the psychological explanation for this doesn't fit, and perhaps there's something physiological. So I want to go learn to find the physiological root cause of emotional and physical dysfunction and help people heal for good by fixing
Mm,
the cause. So the doctor who diagnosed me with celiac actually said, if you want to know how to do this from the beginning, don't go to MD school and then have to go do extra training. Do it right from the start. Go to naturopathic medical school, and you'll learn about the whole body as a system and how to heal the body so that people can thrive. So that's what I did.
awesome. So I kind of want to provide a baseline, if you will. When you talk about functional medicine, I think it seems like a buzz term right now because there's a lot of people. I just kind of want to sift through the noise. How do you define functional medicine?
So for me, functional medicine is based on understanding of the optimal biochemistry that our bodies need to work. And it's aimed on optimizing function. So it's not giving you a pill to fix a symptom.
Mm.
It's on giving you what your body needs to heal itself. And there's a very stark contrast, right, between, and it's, there's a stark contrast between traditional medicine because this is a gap that we have in medicine. We have an amazing medical system in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you get in a car accident, you totally want to be here and have them patch you up.
Mm-hmm.
And our specialists are amazing. But if if you're somebody who's sick, you've had the experience of walking into your rheumatologist or your gastroenterologist, and it's like they're just treating their one thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they're gonna look at your antibodies, and they don't care about like your knee or your
Mm-hmm.
headaches or whatever because they don't have time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're just like, how much of this steroid do we need to give you this time? You know,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. And so we really need a space where people can go and be seen as a whole person because that's where you get all the data that you need to really find the root cause
Mm-hmm.
and help people heal themselves. But that type of medicine takes time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it takes like, you know, you really can't do that medicine in under an hour because you have to
Mm-hmm.
do so much information gathering, and then you have to do so much education.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's a very long way to answer your question, but
That's no, that hits all the important things that I was expecting, I was hoping to get from that answer, right? Exactly what you mentioned is like treating literally the function, like how is something functioning versus this is how it's functioning now. These are the symptoms that you get that you don't like, so let's just deal with those. And somehow that's going to make you better, or at least delay, I don't know, your body eating itself from the inside out for another year or two, or you don't have to think about it.
yeah, just calm down. Don't worry about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's to me, it's about optimizing performance and joy, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I think our birthright is to be in a state of optimal health.
Yeah.
But we get pulled away from that.
Mm-hmm.
Eat poor diet, whatever, and we don't get helpful messaging really from our media because most of the health education that we get is from people who are selling us things in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's not a great way to get your education because usually you're being sold one thing. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
this week coconut oil is going to cure cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Next week, and so then your fridge is just full of like coconut oil and like I don't know
Flax seeds.
butter.
Yeah.
How do I put this together and eat in a way that actually makes me healthy?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's our job. So that's what naturopathic doctors go to school to learn is to help you create a food as medicine plan that works for you, right? You shouldn't be spending hundreds of dollars on supplements every month.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for me, with mental health, because that really has become a huge focus of my practice,
Mm-hmm.
is is helping people with mental health issues. I would say there's really two pillars of that. For me, it's biochemistry and biofeedback. So and really the third I would argue is biology. But so really helping people to understand how does your brain work, right? Like what kind of type of brain type do you have? Where do you maybe have some low blood flow patterns in your brain?
Mm-hmm.
and and then we talk about like, do you have, maybe you come in with depression, well, is it a low serotonin depression or a low dopamine depression? Has anybody ever asked you the questions to try to figure that out? And I help people understand how their unique bodies work,
Mm-hmm.
and when we give them what they need, it's like all the struggle drops away.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many women have called me crying just being like, I tried every different medication there was, right? I tried Zoloft and the SNRIs and you know, like the sort of neuroleptics, and everything made me worse
Mm-hmm.
because nobody treated everything that was going on at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. So that's what happens, guys. If you like really push somebody and you give them like a ton of serotonin, but you haven't fixed the other stuff that's going on in their body,
Mm-hmm.
you get symptoms. You're not going to heal in a cohesive way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's so beautiful. Our medicine is so beautiful. It makes me so excited. It really,
It's yeah, and it's getting us back to, again, how humans should be functioning on a daily basis.
yeah.
So, kind of bringing the whole picture around. Uh, you mentioned, right, having going inpatient, right, because of the eating disorder and the celiac disease, and kind of breaking down that stereotype of what it's like for someone to be going through these types of similar conditions. And you mentioned people like pastors, people like moms, people like CEOs.
Mhm.
In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, these are leaders. These are people who have to deal with high stress situations on a daily basis, right? having to either put out fires. I mean, whether you're a mom, you're always putting out fires, literally and figuratively. Um, Stress is kind of like one of those foundational components to it, right? Let's talk about that. What, yeah.
So you and I come from the same background, right, of biofeedback, and I think so. That's the other piece, and I think this is so beautiful because therapy is so helpful for people, and it's really completely separate, I would argue, from biofeedback because every single human on the planet could benefit from having a safe space to talk about what's going on with them. But when we talk about biofeedback and managing stress, we're coming from a very scientific point of view in the way that we look at how people respond to stress
Mm.
and how they self-stress.
Mm-hmm.
So I ask about adverse childhood events, and I'm sure you do too, and when we're assessing people's past, because we're actually looking for patterns. So we're not so much looking to say, what did you not get from mom or dad, and let's talk about that. No, what we're asking about is your foundation, because a lot of people are programmed either because of the way they grew up or the way that their brain works to either be a hypermobilizer or an immobilizer. We have this nerve called the vagus nerve
Mm.
that regulates our parasympathetic nervous system. And so when we have these reactions to stress, it can either be fight or flight, or it can be shut down and freeze, or it can be engage in safety. And so we're working on those three pathways when we help people to optimize their nervous system function in response to stress and stay resilient. And so my example that I use is like, maybe you're somebody who grew up in an environment where one of your parents was an alcoholic, right? And so you're kind of used to scanning your environment at all times for danger, right? It's 8 o'clock, dad's about to come home. Who's going to walk in the door? Is it going to be happy dad who lets you eat Pop
Mm.
Tarts for dinner, or is it going to be not happy dad? And then we kind of need to like get to our room pretty quick and put all our siblings in with us and stay safe. You develop a lot of like what can almost feel like superpowers when you're under that amount of stress, right? Like as an adult, it makes you hyper aware of your surroundings. So you can read a room like nobody else, right? You're going to pick up on little cues of things that aren't going as they should before everybody else. You can probably read people really well, read body language really well.
Mm.
But when you're in that state of hypermobilization, it's quite stressful for your
Mm-hmm.
nervous system because you're always on alert. And so we see those types of people come into the clinic and they've got gut issues or sleep issues because they can't immobilize in safety. They can't calm down because calming down feels unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you calm down too much when you were a kid, you might not be able to really anticipate what was going to happen in your environment and stay safe. So our job through biofeedback is to help people start to balance the way their nervous systems operate so that you can rest and digest and heal, and take advantage of like those superpowers you developed in childhood, but balance them with some healthier nervous habits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to use, that was great. I want to build off that. I kind of like to use the analogy, or not the analogy, but just saying that, what served you in the past to help you survive in that moment doesn't necessarily, or is not serving you now, right? These patterns of this fight or
Right.
flight, it's like they helped you get through that moment, right? In your life, but now they're kind of self-deprecating, if you will, or they're not helping you build a better you, right? You're starting to get more symptoms because you have to keep repeating that self and doing that over and over.
Yep.
It's kind of like that metaphor of you're attacking yourself, right? And then we get into autoimmune conditions. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so with that being said, right, we experience stress in many different ways. Everybody experiences stress differently. How in your practice, how do you measure that? What does that look like, that process?
So it's multifactorial. So part of it is the intake, right, where I'm asking head to toe symptoms in every single system of the body. So oftentimes, if somebody is a hypermobilizer, we're going to see, like I mentioned, problems with the gut. We might see some evidence of some chronic inflammation because they're not repairing their tissues.
Hmm.
Maybe they'll have joint pain. They may be somebody who's carrying a lot of muscle tension because they're always on high alert, right? So they'll have some neck pain, some headaches. So it can show up physically with symptoms. Mentally, I'm doing a brain health assessment, and then I'm asking about symptoms of depression and anxiety, and I'm differentiating between them. So, hypermobilizers often have a sort of like low serotonin, low GABA picture, right? Because their
Mm.
brain is always going. So they tend to sort of burn through those more calming chemicals more quickly than other people.
Mm.
So what they'll notice is I'm super irritable, right? Like people chewing, typing on a keyboard, really pisses me off. That it didn't because I love my kids, but when they eat their cereal, I want to like murder someone. And it's like that's a very classic low serotonin picture, high activity anterior cingulate gyrus, which makes a very, very good brain type for identifying errors. Right,
Hmm.
they're the people in meetings who are going to catch the spelling error before you do a flyer, or they're going to raise their hand and say, "I'm sorry, like has anybody thought about this problem that we could run into?" But at home, it can make life difficult when you're trying to just like enjoy breakfast with your family and their chewing is driving you crazy.
Hmm.
Right? Or it could be like low GABA pictures. So those people tend to have more panic attacks, more anxiety. They really tend to like alcohol and marijuana to help them relax because those are substances that really hit on those GABA receptors. And so starting to sort of like suss out what's going on with their brain, and what neurochemicals they're likely either high or low in
Hmm.
is another aspect of it. And then looking at their history. So that when we ask about the ACEs, ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Events. There's about 18 of them. So the more ACEs somebody has, I'll go into it and I'll ask them in a very like therapeutic way, start to say like, hey, describe to me a little bit of what kept you safe growing up
Hmm.
or what you learned to do. And so we can start to see like, were you somebody who needed to stay quiet, shut down? Do you not have an easy time accessing words to describe your emotions?
Hmm.
That's somebody who's going to be a little more in that immobilized state versus somebody whose symptoms are they get really angry, they lash out, they got to go for a run, they feel like they're panicking. Um, so a lot of it is asking really good questions.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's what I do
Nice.
in clinic anyway.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what are, for people who are watching this or catching the replay, what are some just fundamental basic strategies that they can impart at home, right? I mean, because when you're talking about all these symptoms or the actions that you're doing, I mean, I'm running in the back of my head. I'm like, I mean, I do that sometimes and I do that sometimes too. Like, oh man, maybe I should talk to you. So what are some pretty, baseline strategies that people can use at home to help, I guess, modulate or regulate their nervous system?
So there's a couple different ways. The first is, if I suspect, so say does chewing bother you? Let's just get to the root of this, Dr. Sanders.
Me?
Yes. Go for it.
Sure, why not? Let's call it chewing.
But my fan on my computer is probably driving you
No,
insane.
no, no, that's okay.
So if if you've got a more low serotonin picture,
Hmm.
there's a couple different things we can do. The first, we're going to focus on your gut and your nutrition, right? So I want to make sure, do you have enough of the precursors to
Mm.
serotonin to make enough, right? So are you getting enough protein and tryptophan, B6, folate, B12 at a minimum? We're
Hmm.
going to look at magnesium and your mineral status. So for all my clients who come in, I do a nutrient analysis, which means I put a 24-hour intake in the computer. I do 80 different data points. So I look at how much calcium, how much magnesium, zinc, all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the amino acids, all the omega-3s, and I show them what they're getting in a day, in a typical day. And
Hmm.
usually it elicits pretty quickly that they are under eating certain nutrients that might be important for making things like serotonin. And then it's like, oh, that's kind of a no-brainer. We'll optimize those nutrients, see if that helps. That's one step. To optimize the health of the vagus nerve, I'll often do nerve exercises with people, which I'm sure you have like talked to somebody about or you talked to your clients about, since that was a really foundational part of our biofeedback training. But I'll give people vagus nerve exercises, so gargling, singing really loudly, cold water on the face, paced breathing every single day. But for a lot of my hypermobilizers, paced breathing and meditation at first doesn't work.
Mm.
It's too, it feels too scary because when they start to immobilize, their body will sort of kick them out of that state because it hasn't been safe for them. So
Mm.
what we'll start to do is is have them start, first we'll start theoretical, and we'll start by bringing awareness to what's going on for them. Because that's the first step of mindfulness, right? It's like sort of bringing awareness and detaching from what's going on, and looking at the present moment as an observer.
Hmm.
And then we'll start to do things that get them in their body and start to get them noticing different sensations. Um, so some of it at first, I really truly believe you can't do a whole lot of cognitive stuff and behavioral stuff if somebody doesn't have the right nutrition on board, because their brain's not working right.
Mm.
Right? So like if I'm gonna give them all the magnesium and stuff I think they need first for them to feel good, and then we do the practices, because then it's easy.
Hmm.
If I don't do that, I find people really just struggle, and then they're in this loop of shame because they're like, I can't even do this. You know, why am
Mm.
I lazy? Like, why am I not doing this? Whereas if I get their chemicals right, it's easy for them to do the behaviors. Um, does that answer your question?
That does, yeah. Um, I just, I think it's wonderful. Like the stuff that the services that you're providing, I think it's kind of blowing the doors open in terms of mind body medicine, and especially biofeedback, because again, we've had similar training, and I've talked to a couple other people who have had similar training. Like my approach to biofeedback versus maybe Dr. John Baker versus yours is so different. And I think I really it's refreshing, honestly, to take into account all the stuff that we've learned, but then you're like, okay, let's talk about the nutraceuticals, because that's something that I honestly overlook too sometimes as well. It's like, why aren't you getting the changes that I'm expecting and that you want? Oh, maybe it's because you're just deficient in XYZ nutrient. Maybe let's tweak your diet a little bit so it's going to be a little bit better on, on your brain and your health in general. That is smart. You are a smart cookie.
Feel like it's, so for me it makes sense because I had a lot of exposure to traditional psychology and psychiatry through both my own treatment before I found out I had celiac, right? So here, like, it makes sense because I spent 10 years trying the pills, trying the therapy, didn't work. For me, it was nutritional. So it's a no-brainer for me. It's like built into my DNA at this
Hmm.
point to just assume. Um, but a lot of traditional psychiatry is still really based on this 1960s model of you're going to flip open the DSM, or the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. You're going to check boxes. Okay, are you sad? Are you not sleeping? Did you gain weight? Okay, congratulations, you have depression. Here,
Yeah.
20 pills. I'm going to pick one at random and throw it at you. And
Hmm.
that works for some people, guys. Like, listen, if you're depressed, go to, and you can only get to the ER, the primary care doctor, go. Get on whatever you need to get on, and then come to us and do the work, to really heal the root cause. There's nothing wrong with antidepressants,
Hmm.
but we have that process was developed in the 60s and earlier,
Hmm.
and our technology has really advanced, and our understanding of how nutrition relates to biochemistry and blood flow in the brain and behavior, we're now decades beyond that model. But modern medicine and modern psychiatry really hasn't caught up
Hmm.
with that. You have to have sought out some specialized training. So I mean, the majority of U.S. adults will be on an antidepressant at some point in their life,
Hmm.
right? And for many, I see so many people who come in my office. They're on Lexapro, they're on Zoloft. We get their diet right. We work with their psychiatrist if they slowly can titrate off that medication, and they feel great. Um, so there's just like a more strategic way, and I am really blessed to have been like exposed to that, I guess.
Hmm.
And I've seen it work so many times that I'm very, very confident in it. And
Hmm.
it doesn't have to replace typical psychiatry, but functional psychiatry is a great complement because you're helping people heal from the inside out.
Hmm. Yeah. A good segue or tangent, if you will. You've had a lot of training in like those neurodegenerative disorders, specifically Parkinson's, right? You've had specialty training in Parkinson's. How do you incorporate that? Like, again, how did you get into that area of interest? Because it's a little bit different from your path and your journey, right? And yeah.
There is it is actually perfectly related, although we have never talked about this, so I'm impressed that you kind of like put that together. But so there's a field of psychiatry called orthomolecular psychiatry. It's a weird word. It should just be called nutritional psychiatry or functional psychiatry, but that's basically what it means. And I actually came to Bastyr. I chose Bastyr as the naturopathic medical school I wanted to go to because they were the only school at the time that had researchers with NIH grants. And one of the researchers was Lori Mishley. And you guys, if you haven't heard of her, please go look her up. She is like the guru when it comes to Parkinson's. She's got a PhD and ND. She does tons of research. And I wanted to learn from her because I was really impressed with the research that she was doing. So basically, Dr. Mishley was looking at thousands of people with Parkinson's and asking them, what do you eat? What do you drink? How do you move? How do you sleep? What's your social life like? In order to see what's making the difference between people who get Parkinson's and 10 years later they barely have any symptoms and they're still working and walking and functional, and somebody else who gets Parkinson's and 10 years later is completely disabled by it. Could there be a lifestyle component, right? And in this field of neurodegenerative disorders, we're really starting to understand that they are intensely linked to metabolism. We're more understanding them as cellular metabolic disorders. So Alzheimer's is now being called type 3 diabetes, right? Like, it's so intensely related to blood sugar and nutrient status. You guys should go look up the book, The End of Alzheimer's, and the Bredesen protocol, because Dr. Bredesen basically used a naturopathic protocol that contained nutrition, lifestyle, and sleep modifications to reverse the symptoms of Alzheimer's in patients at, I think it was UCLA is where they did that study. So I really wanted to sort of like learn what she was doing and learn from her because I was just so impressed, and I thought it was such an intelligent and effective model, and her patients were getting better. So I got to shadow at her clinic, and like, I have never seen a doctor who is more adored, right? Like, her patients would walk in the living room, they'd see me there as a student and be like, I have to tell you how much I love Dr. Mishley. Bringing her flowers and wine, and like, she's like, I can't take your gifts, but like, they didn't care because they just were so happy with her. And she really has some great research, and you guys can go look up her research on, oh shoot, I forget the exact titles, but maybe I'll put them on my site or I'll send them to you. But basically, lifestyle factors in Parkinson's, and through her almost decade-long survey at this point, they've pulled out a couple different factors. So basically, the more fresh fruits and vegetables you eat, the more nuts and seeds you eat, so the more like a Mediterranean diet you eat, you can essentially slow or even stop your Parkinson's progression, which means your symptoms don't get worse. They found that levodopa really, really helps, which we knew already. That's sort of replacing the dopamine that's deficient in Parkinson's. And then movement. So exercising 30 minutes or more a day is more effective than any pill, really, or as effective as any pill you're going to take when it comes to preventing symptom progression. Dr. Mishley has a great talk on this. I think it's called Nutrition in Parkinson's on Vimeo. Go watch it. I rewatch it like multiple times a year because I just learn more and more each time. So essentially, I was just a fan of Dr. Mishley, and I wanted to like stick close to her. And really, I came to school because I wanted to learn the miraculous stuff, right? Like, I had a miraculous experience with biochemistry where my life changed. And Lori was who I really felt like was doing that real time with patients. And so I wanted to learn from her. So that's how I got involved. And then I got involved in Parkinson's disease summer school, where a lot of experts are brought in from around the world. So whether it's somebody who does movement disorder specialist, or neurologist, or nutritionist, like, everybody comes together to work as a team to teach patients what really matters. Because I know I'm getting on my soapbox about this. I'm sorry, I have 30 seconds left, I promise. But like, people with Parkinson's are brilliant, right? They're usually like 40s to 70s. They're on Facebook, they're reading all the research. And what's amazing is, part of Parkinson's symptoms can be apathy, right? Because of the lack of dopamine. So when you don't have enough dopamine, you don't really have like the regular reward system. So you don't have the same get up and go. You're not motivated in the same way as you might have been before the Parkinson's really became severe. But despite that, these people will, like, these Parkinson's clients will go, they read all the stuff, they do all the things, it's intensely rewarding to work with this community because when they hear something helps, they go and do it and they get better. So
Hmm.
like as a doctor, that's what we live for,
Hmm.
right? Um, so we just, so I basically, Dr. Mishley, for her research, lends itself very well to a lifestyle protocol, right? So you educate people about like how to do a Mediterranean diet, how to move safely, what supplements work. Her research includes evidence about that as well. And so anybody who comes to me, I'm really just basing a lot of my protocol on her research and the research I was introduced to um, through sort of doing that more global study of what's going on with Parkinson's right now. And it works. People feel better. It's so rewarding.
That's, I mean, like you said, at the end of it, that's what's most important, right? People are getting better, right?
Mhm.
That's why we're in that field, to improve people's lives, right? And
Yeah.
from the ground up, essentially. I do have a question. So, like the protocols that that you put people through with Parkinson's, right? And the Mediterranean diet or a Mediterranean diet-esque um, diet, and then the movement and exercise, are those again geared towards? Are they geared towards providing that dopamine and all the precursors for dopamine, specifically the diet? Like, how do those work? Like, what is the science behind that?
There's a couple different strategies. So, because Parkinson's and Alzheimer's are kind of on this scale of neurodegenerative disorders where you have buildup of plaque or protein in the brain, right? Like the brain really isn't clearing out waste very well. And then with Parkinson's, you have what we used to think was like a lack of dopamine in the 16th nigra, but we're also starting to see that it's a vagus nerve disorder as well. Like we can see
Mm,
changes in the vagus nerve 20 years before Parkinson's is diagnosed. So the protocol is it's at least twofold. The first is you want to reduce oxidative damage to cell membranes. Because that will ultimately slow some of the symptoms of neurodegeneration because you're protecting existing cells.
mhm,
Um, and the lining of our nerves is made up of a lot of fatty material, which is very sensitive to oxidation, right? So if you guys have ever left a bottle of olive oil out, stove, it oxidizes, like it gets rancid,
mhm,
right? And that's what happens. Our cell membranes are made of fat. So when you have a lot of oxidants in oxidative stress in your system, that's what's happening to your cell membranes, and they're not very fluid. They don't send signals very well. So you want to protect that cellular membrane health, and that's a very simplified explanation, but I think it's one that everybody can understand.
mhm,
You can increase the sensitivity of dopamine receptors to the dopamine that is left in the body system using a supplement called choline. There's a number
mhm,
of substances that will do this, but choline has been proven to do it really well. So we'll optimize the amount of choline in people's diets. With Parkinson's, when you're taking levodopa and cinnamate, things that replace dopamine, you can't take it with a meal that contains protein
mm,
because the other amino acids will compete for absorption and you won't get the same effect. So guys, you kind of like when you eat a meal, you have like a little transporter. Think of it as a bus that transports proteins or amino acids from your bloodstream into your brain. You only have a certain amount of seats on that bus. And so if you're taking a medication that is an amino acid, you don't want to eat a big steak because the steak might outcompete that medication, and the medication you're paying for isn't getting absorbed.
mhm,
But often that causes problems with people with Parkinson's because then they're just eating a completely low protein diet and they don't have enough protein to, make their own dopamine to maintain muscle mass, keep their blood sugar stable. It's a really important part of managing neurodegenerative disorders because they're so sensitive to high blood sugar and insulin resistance. So I'll teach them how to safely eat protein and effectively eat protein. Often in people with Parkinson's, swallowing can be an issue, so we're going to talk about safe foods to eat and how to eat them. So really, I do a lot of food as medicine planning for my clients, which is not something we did in school a lot, right? Like we were kind of just taught like you tell people what to eat and send them on their way. But that really doesn't work if you're trying to help somebody create a lifestyle.
mm,
So particularly with people with Parkinson's, I lay out their whole day. And I'm like, you're gonna take your levodopa at this time, then you eat this for breakfast, then you eat this for a snack, then you take your second dose, then you eat this for lunch, and we give them a full plan because that's really what I feel it takes and
Mm-hmm.
it makes it much more easy and doable for people who are already feeling overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And my goal is, um, yeah, to just get them eating and digesting as much from food as possible so that they're not spending a ton of money on supplements.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah. And then,
Nice.
yeah, the movement, as you know, is really targeted on making sure that they maintain their balance and the health of their brain.
Mm-hmm.
You could talk more about that. And I don't do a ton of movement. I tend to refer out for movement stuff because I'm just not as practiced in that sphere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm sure you work with people with neurodegenerative disorders. What do you guys tend to focus on when you're in clinic?
A little bit, yeah. I would say Dr. Mark Heisig more so than I do. He can definitely get into more of the functional neurology because he has that side of training with neurodegeneration. I mean, everybody knows in general when you are exercising, you're releasing endorphins anyway, so that's going to provide that extra little boost. I have one question for you that you may or may not have an answer for, because cannabis or CBD has been on the rise,
Yeah.
right? Like another buzz thing, another supplement to get. We've now found that there are a bunch of different types of cannabinoids, right? Specifically CBG.
Mm.
And in my limited knowledge, I know that CBG has to do with neuroinflammation, right? And that's kind of the overarching picture is let's reduce oxidative damage in the brain. Let's see if we can try and reduce those plaques, if you will, right? Get the brain functioning optimally. And so I'm thinking, okay, if we want to address inflammation, or seen anything or heard anything about using CBG specific to neurodegeneration or Parkinson's?
So here's what I'll say. I practice in Pennsylvania right now,
Mm-hmm.
where CBD is legal, but THC containing products really
Mm-hmm.
aren't. They're just sort of starting this process of being able to get it with a medical license. Um, Lori initially through her school, and you guys can just go to pd-school-teachable.com if you want to look it up. But she has a whole 2 hour long presentation on this on CBD and THC and Parkinson's.
Oh, awesome.
Is really helpful not only for patients but for practitioners. Um, I have seen and heard of people who find CBD and THC containing substances to be really helpful for controlling tremor. They also can come with some side effects, right? So people with Parkinson's already tend to have low blood pressure,
Mm-hmm.
and CBD THC can sort of give you even lower blood pressure, and that can be a problem when you're already at a fall risk.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some risks and benefits to managing this, and there are people who specialize in this. So Michelle Sexton is an ND who specializes in the use of cannabis in Parkinson's.
Mm-hmm.
So if people are looking for more info, I would say she's really the expert that people should go talk to. And then same with Dr. Mishley, go look at her course. But here's what I'll say, because a lot of people, especially everybody on the East Coast, thinks that I am like a weed doctor. Like they're like, that's bad. Like you can tell me how to smoke weed, and I'm like, not at all. Like we weren't even allowed to be taught about it in naturopathic medical school because we were federally funded.
It was still a taboo topic. Yeah.
So a lot of us have this extra training, but um, in general, what I would do if somebody came to my practice, they were asking me that question, I would refer them to the experts, and then what I would say to them is, your best tool against neuroinflammation is a diet that is high in antioxidants and low in arachidonic acid, which is the precursor to every inflammatory molecule in your body,
Mm-hmm.
and low in omega 6s, high in omega 3s. Let's do that first.
Mm-hmm.
Then then worry about the CBD, because the other thing is CBD and THC products are expensive.
Yeah.
And they're not really like an essential nutrient, right? So I would much rather have somebody get a calming and anti-inflammatory effect from magnesium or nuts and seeds that contain both magnesium and antioxidants
Mm-hmm.
than have to go, God forbid, like especially if it's not legal in your state, you gotta go to like your dry cleaner and talk to
Yeah. Don't go out of your way. Don't
no,
recommend it. You want to talk about safety in MindBody Medicine? Yeah.
don't do that. So to me, it's first things first, and then yeah, I mean, you should interview one of those ladies. It would be a great interview.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, as a tangent, and the reason why I was talking about it is because I know someone who's a retired respiratory therapist. And as soon as she stopped doing that, she's like, I'm retired, I'm done. She started going into something called SMJ counseling, which is literally all she does is counsel people. She works with the Ames Institute in Seattle. So with Dr. Oh my gosh, what's her name? I can't believe it.
Dr. Leanna Standish.
Yes, Dr. Standish. And so they have like this huge spreadsheet. And Ames Institute is great. I think they do neurodegeneration, but they're mainly do oncology, adjunctive oncology, integrative oncology, if you will. But they're like, here are the 20 cannabinoids. Here's what each one does, right? This is what you should get. This is what this does. Because everything's different, right? Your CBD, there's like CBH, I think. There's CBG. There's a whole bunch of different ones. Anyway.
It's a whole PhD.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Really?
It's much more different than, again, going to your your laundromat. Right? They're not going to know.
My grandmother asked me, she was like, I'm thinking of getting this. And I was still in school, and I was like, I feel like there's other things we can do first. She's like, well, I have a connection. And I was like, Mama, no. I'm like, don't go.
Yeah.
Dry cleaner. You wouldn't go to them for another medicine, like.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're just about out of time. Great, awesome, great talk today. Two last questions for you. Number one, how can people get a hold of you? If they're interested in working with you, want to know more, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so people can go to my website. It's www.drkatehenry.com. Kate is with a K. Or you can follow me on Instagram, because that's where I share a lot of the free content. So Dr. Eric and I are actually pretty similar. We like to interview people to really educate our audiences. And especially, I think both of us really believe that this information is a birthright. People shouldn't have to pay for it. You should just be able to go somewhere and learn it. So you can look me up on Instagram. It's just Dr. Kate Henry, DrKateHenry, and follow along and stay posted with me that way.
Awesome.
But, I'm really proud. I have a discovery call. We both do this, I think, through our practice, where people can call in for 15 minutes and just pick my brain. And they can say, like, do you think you're the right person to help me? And honestly, if I'm not, I'll tell you. And I'll just say, actually, I think you need to go see this guy, or like go do a virtual consult with this expert before you come see me, and that way we get the most bang for your buck. So I'm on your team from the minute you call me. I'll help you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, again, sometimes you might not be a good fit, and who,
Yeah.
pass them off to someone who they're going to get the most benefit from.
Yep.
Last question. What is your Hughes Moves health tip of the day?
You did not prepare me for this.
No, I don't prepare anybody for this. That's the point.
My health of the day?
Yeah, on the spot.
I would say the tip I give most often is, if you are feeling sad, if you are feeling really emotional, if you're feeling out of control, if you're feeling panicky, frustrated, irritable, angry, it is helpful to check in with yourself and think about when the last time you ate a balanced meal was, and when the last time you drank water was. Because so much of what we think is poor mental health is just being hungry and dehydrated. Your brain needs blood to work, and the fluid in your blood only comes from the fluid you drink. So if you're dehydrated, your brain is not getting enough blood flow, and it's gonna make you feel sad and cranky and angry. So that would be my biggest tip.
That's great. That's awesome. I mean, it's totally relatable, because my lunch is calling me from the other room.
Gosh, go eat.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, Dr. Kate, thank you for taking the time and talking. It was great to pick your brain for a 45-minute discovery call.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Go eat a balanced meal. Tell me how you feel after.
Sounds good. All right. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.